This New York Jets offseason is the most important ever, and I think Joe Douglas is going to have to take big swings to keep his job beyond this year. Let's do a full New York Jets offseason. Strap in. It's going to be a long one. What is going on, guys? Welcome back to Talking Jets with Tigo. My name is Tigo, and today we're going to be doing an entire New York Jets offseason. I don't think that anybody is going to get fired and lose their jobs, but everybody is going to be put on the hot seat, and you're going to have to take big swings, especially with the news that came out that Aaron Rodgers might want to play for the next 2 years, which is huge, which it elongates our window to go and get into a Super Bowl by an additional year than I think that everybody was expecting. So Joe Douglas is going to have to go big and really invest in this offseason. And you know what? He's going to have to knock this offseason out of the park. And I think that starts with a bunch of different moves that we know that he can make. So let's do it. We're going to run through an entire offseason, free agency, the draft, everything, and talk about what this team might look like at the beginning of next year after a full offseason. Strap in. It's going to be a long one, and I'm going to try to make it as quickly as possible. So the season is over, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start shopping Zach Wilson in the offseason. I think that a lot of people, especially with the New York Jets fans and just him in general, are kind of sick of Zach in New York. Zach's probably sick of being in New York. He needs a fresh start. And I think that Jets fans are going to undervalue what Zach's value in the trade market is actually going to be. I think a lot of people are going to blame the New York Jets' ineptitude at developing a quarterback and take a risk on a guy who has all the talent in the world. So we're going to start there. And the first move I'm going to make is I'm going to trade Zach Wilson to the Detroit Lions for a 5th-round pick. We know that the Detroit Lions have Jared Goff, and if they can take 1 year of Zach Wilson and see, hey, who knows, maybe this guy can take over for Jared Goff after the season is over. Hey, we found our quarterback. We only had to pay a 5th-round pick. And if not, you know what? They have a backup. Jared Goff doesn't really get hurt all that often, and they can just evaluate and see, because they're not going to really be in a position to go and get a quarterback in this year's draft. And taking a swing on a guy with a late mid-round pick, a day 3 pick, is a move that I think that they can make. So that's first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ship Zach Wilson out of here. Thank you for your time here. I'm sorry that we failed you. I'm sorry that you failed us. Sayonara. Bye. And now we got to start looking at who are the players that are currently on the New York Jets that I'm bringing back. And there are a couple of them. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players that are currently on the New York Jets that I am bringing back. Number 1 is going to be Quentin Jefferson. Obviously, we know that he got an injury and is out for the rest of the year, but I think he's played exceptionally well for the New York Jets, and the New York Jets are about to lose almost everyone on the interior of the defensive line, just like we did last year, and we're going to need to revamp that room a little bit, and the only person in that interior defensive line room that I will be bringing back is Quentin Jefferson. I'm going to bring him back on a 1-year, $3.5 million deal, and that's it. The next person that I will be bringing back is 2 safeties. We know that we're going to be losing Jordan Whitehead, and I'm not going to be bringing Jordan Whitehead back. Thank you for your service. I thought he played pretty well for us in the role that he was asked to, but I'm actually going to be bringing back the other 2 safeties, one that we never saw in a Jets uniform and one that has stood out this year in a big way, and that's Chuck Clark and Ashton Davis, both at and around the same age, and they both kind of play the same position. We know that Tony Adams is going to be, a starting free safety for us, but we really need to fix that third safety, that box safety, and Chuck Clark and Ashton Davis play that role exceptionally well. We know how the New York Jets value that position and how they want those guys doing those things, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring both of those guys back. It's not going to cost us a ton of money. I gave Ashton Davis a 1-year, $2.5 million deal to come back, and I gave Chuck Clark a 1-year, $4 million deal to come back. And there we go. We've kind of handled our, secondary, and we continue to maintain a high level of play on the secondary, specifically for the New York Jets. The other pieces, and these are the three big pieces that I'm bringing back, is obviously Thomas Morstead has earned an extension, and so have Greg Zuerlein. I'm bringing both of them back. I didn't know what numbers, so I just, whatever kicker and, punter money is, I'm bringing both of them back. And then also, I am going to be bringing back Bryce Huff. The way that I would go about negotiating with Bryce Huff goes very simply. I'm going to offer him the Haason Reddick contract. I'm not going to go a penny higher. And if he wants to go lower, that's on him. But I'm going to bring him on the Haason Reddick contract, and that's it. That is a 3-year, $45 million contract, $15 million per. That gives us enough time to, fluctuate the money and mess around with the money so that his cap hit isn't all that great and all of that stuff. And so, boom, I'm bringing back edge rusher Bryce Huff and keeping the defense dominant, and that's the goal, is to keep the defense dominant. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And that's that. Those are all of the players that I'm going to be bringing back. Now, we do have to talk about some players that we are going to have to cut, get rid of, but more importantly, some contracts that we're going to have to restructure. So there are 5 players that I have restructured, and it is CJ Mosley, Laken Tomlinson, DJ Reed, Jonathan Franklin Myers, and Allen Lazard. That frees up so much cap space without digging way too deep into the 2025 cap space as well. And so it gives us a ton of space to work with so that we can go out into free agency and create a lot of space. But I also will be cutting CJ Uzomah. Thank you for your time here. He was a great person in the locker room, and he was a great energy and a spokesperson, but the level of play isn't at the level of the contract that he's at. We can save $5.5 million by cutting him. I'm going to take that money and I'm going to go and move on. And that's all of the in-house, housekeeping work done. We've restructured all of the contracts. We've brought back the players that we want to bring back. Now let's start talking about free agency and who we need to bring in and what are the positions that I have recognized as needs for the New York Jets in the short term so that we can go and try and really compete for a Super Bowl over the next 2 years. But most importantly, what are the things long term that we can also address at the same time? And I think that this starts with the defensive side of the ball. We do need to address the interior of the defensive line. The sad reality is that this upcoming draft is not good when it comes to the interior of the defensive line, specifically in depth. And we can't afford to be using high-level draft picks on interior defensive linemen at this point in time. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be bringing in a big-name free agent interior defensive lineman, partnering him up with Quinnen Williams, and now when you add Quinton Jefferson and Perion Winfrey back into the mix, we've got an interior defensive line group that I feel comfortable with for the entire year. And the person that I'm going to be bringing in is Teair Tart from, I believe he's with the Carolina Panthers right now. And so I'm going to be bringing in Tart. I'm going to give him a 3-year, $31.5 million contract. That's $10.5 million per. And now we're going to have 2 studs on the interior of the defensive line. That's it. They're studs. And it really helps solidify that room so that we're not constantly having the same amount of turnover and having to address it. And you know what? The interior of the defensive line is solid over the next couple of years. And that's that. And that's the last person that I will be bringing in on the defensive side of the ball. The reality is that the New York Jets have a lot of their guys that are on defense that are playing at a high level under contract, and they're going to stick with this team. So I'm not going to touch anybody else. I'm not going to re-sign anybody else. I'm not going to do anything like that. Now, if we want to talk about in the middle of the season and all of that stuff, we can address that later. But in this offseason, this is the way that I'm doing it. And the rest of the guys that are coming in are all going to be on the offensive side of the ball. So let's start with the most important position, the backup quarterback. We saw what happened when we didn't address the backup quarterback position this last offseason. Aaron Rodgers uncharacteristically got hurt and is going to miss the entire season, and we cannot leave that to the same chance. At 40, while what he's doing is miraculous, we don't want to have a season go to waste because our franchise quarterback goes down. So I'm actually going to be bringing in quarterback Marcus Mariota on a 1-year, $4 million deal. Is he the best available guy? No, there are a ton of other guys, but I think Marcus Mariota understands what his job is, and that is a backup quarterback. And I think some of these higher level guys might think that they have an opportunity to compete for a franchise, and money is a serious thing that we have to consider when it comes to this team. So I'm going to, again, put the eggs in the Aaron Rodgers basket, but have a better backup plan than Zach Wilson in Marcus Mariota on the roster. Then we do need to address this wide receiver room. Allen Lazard cannot be wide receiver 2 going into this season. And if it is up to me, I want to bring in a ton of talent. And I think the best place to go, in my opinion, in terms of a contract and a player who you can come in for a short term, in the short term to help get your guys going, is I'm going to go back to the Odell Beckham Jr. well, and I'm going to bring him back on a 1-year, $10 million deal, the contract that we offered him last year before, Baltimore blew us out of the water. Now, there's no confirmation or anything like that, but if OBJ makes it to free agency, I think it makes a ton of sense to bring him in to be wide receiver 3 and to push, in an ideal world, Allen Lazard to wide receiver 4. And I know what you're asking, who's wide receiver 2? We'll get to that. But I think that's the biggest thing for me that we're going to do, is just bring in high-level depth. And that's what I think Odell Beckham Jr. absolutely can be, is high-level depth. 1 year, $10 million is not all that much in the grand scheme of things. The other thing that we know we need to address is the offensive line. And there's a lot of different ways that we can go about this, but I do believe the reports that are coming out that Alijah Vera-Tucker has been told that he will be an offensive tackle for the New York Jets moving forward. And if that's the case, I'm going to slot him in at left tackle. He's our best offensive lineman. He's our most consistent offensive lineman. And I'm going to, kind of ignore the injuries and say, you know what, they're unrelated. And I'm going to just bank that he's going to have a healthy season and he's going to be my left tackle. I'm going to tell him that as soon as the offseason starts, so that all of his rehab, all of his work, all of his everything can go to be getting ready to play left tackle. And I'm going to be bringing in offensive tackle Jermaine Eluemunor out of the Las Vegas Raiders to play the right tackle position. I'm going to give him a 2-year, $14.5 million deal. You think he can play right tackle at a relatively high level, and it provides depth at that position. That's what we need. We need to have guys that aren't super hurt. And again, don't forget, we've got a draft. We're going to address the offensive tackle room in the draft as well. But we need to just bring in as many healthy bodies there as possible and have a really, really good competition. But moving into the year, for right now, I'm going to have my starting offensive tackles be Alijah Vera-Tucker on the left, Eluemunor on the right, and that is how I feel comfortable with it. Laken Tomlinson can't go anywhere because of his contract, so he's going to stay at left guard, and Joe Tippmann has earned the right to be the starting center for the New York Jets, and that's exactly where he's going to play. But now that leaves a hole at right guard, and I want to bring somebody in who can play that position at a high level, but also address that position in the draft, just like I'm going to be doing with the offensive tackle room. And I am going to be bringing in Kevin Zeitler, the offensive guard out of, I believe it is Baltimore, to come in and play right guard. At his age, we know that he can come in and play at a high level. I'm going to give him a 2-year, $14 million year, $14 million contract, so that his contract ties to how long Aaron Rodgers is going to play. And hopefully sooner rather than later, one of these youngsters, one of these rookies, or even one of the guys that are on the roster who can be part of the future long term can come in and supplant Zeitler and win the right guard spot so that we can have a nice young offensive line. And that's it. And that's everybody that I'm going to be going out in getting in free agency. The wonderful thing about this is I did the contracts all on over the cap, and that leaves us with anywhere from $13 to $16 million left. That's more than enough money to go out and sign our rookie class that we're going to be bringing in, which is going to have a ton of names. But more importantly, it also gives us spending money in the season so that we can do that. Let's talk about the draft. So the first thing I want to do is I want to trade back and gather as many assets as possible. I know that we got a 5th round pick, but I want to throw as many pieces as this team as possible. And even if that means cutting draft picks and all of this stuff, I don't care. I'm going to throw as many pieces at the puzzle as possible so that we can build the best roster that's available, and I'm going to start that off by trading the number 7 pick to the Arizona Cardinals and dropping back to the 17th pick. By doing that, we're gaining a second-round pick at the top of the second round, which is great, and we're swapping picks in the third round to make everything nice and pretty. And in the first round for the New York Jets, I'm going to take wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. out of LSU. If you are a subscriber to the Draft Dodgers podcast over at Project Prospect of that me and Dom, you'll know how much I love Brian Thomas Jr., but Brian Thomas Jr. is truly a burner on the outside, and now you're bringing in a guy who can be wide receiver 2, who is a high-level talent, and partnering him up with Garrett Wilson and just giving Aaron Rodgers as many weapons as possible. We know how good Garrett Wilson is and that connection that he's going to have with Aaron Rodgers. We know what OBJ and what Allen Lazard are, especially when they're playing with Aaron Rodgers, in terms of like OBJ is just going to be solid and Allen Lazard should hopefully get to below average, with Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback. But Brian Thomas Jr. gives us not only a long-term, young, exciting piece in the wide receiver room, but another weapon for Aaron Rodgers in a big position of need. And now we have a second-round pick, something that we didn't have before, and I'm going to use that to address the offensive tackle room and take offensive tackle Jordan Morgan out of Arizona. I love Jordan Morgan, and I think that he's going to be that kind of player that is going to be taken probably in the bottom of the first, top of the second. And if he fell to us here, this would be a great pick for the New York Jets. Is he ready to start right away? No, but he has such a high level, I think he has such a high ceiling and ability to play that coming in, I think he can legitimately compete with Jermaine Illuminor and push for that right tackle spot. And you know what? I think he can start sooner rather than later, and that's the whole point. High-level backups. If Illuminor or AVT go out, Jordan Morgan is a guy I feel really comfortable coming in. And again, that pushes Carter Warren and Max Mitchell down the depth chart, which is good for the Jets. We know what they look like, and I like Carter Warren. I think he still needs some time to develop, and I like Max Mitchell, and I think still thinks he needs some time to develop. But again, just high-level backups, and that's what we're doing. And we're just stacking the offensive line room with talent so that we don't have to worry about it in terms of injury. And now we go into the third round where, again, we moved up in the third round a little bit, and so that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be addressing the quarterback room because we do need to start thinking beyond Aaron Rodgers, and I'm going to do that in the third round here with quarterback Michael Pratt out of Tulane. I know a lot of people aren't going to like this pick because they're going to be like, oh, we got to think about now. The draft, you still have to think about the future. And so with Michael Pratt out of Tulane in the third round, I think this is a ton of value. I really, really like Michael Pratt and the ability to sit not just behind Aaron Rodgers, but behind Marcus Mariota as well, and really just sit and learn for 2 years with a guy that I originally had a second round grade on. And then, as things happen and the quarterbacks go up and other quarterbacks go down, he was available here in the third round. I thought it was an insane value, so I took it, and we move forward. And we got to go back to the offensive line. We're going to stay on the offensive side of the ball. That's where we need the most help, and we're going to go get guard Zach Zinter out of Michigan. And this is the one player that I really, really like for the New York Jets. The reason for that is because I think Zach Zinter can come in and immediately compete with Kevin Zeitler for that right guard spot, and whoever wins, whatever, that's fine. But Zach Zinter gives us the ability to think beyond not just Kevin Zeitler, but Laken Tomlinson as well, and know that truthfully, we're going to have a guard for the future and really just, continue to fill in that room. And maybe that allows, if we know he can win the job from Laken Tomlinson and we feel comfortable benching Laken Tomlinson, that might give us the opportunity to look at Max Mitchell at guard more full-time, which is something I think the New York Jets should look into a little bit more. I think he might feel more comfortable there, but that might just be my love for Max Mitchell. Continuing on in the draft, we're going to go to the defensive side of the ball, and we're going to get linebacker Cedric Gray out of North Carolina, just filling that room, with pieces. We used a lot of the linebackers this year in special teams and different things like that. We know that we took Zaire Barnes last year, and then we have Jamie Sherwood. CJ Mosley isn't getting any younger. We got to start looking beyond those years. What are we going to do about the Quincy Williams contract? He was only brought in on a 2-year deal. those are problems for the future, but I'm going to have pieces in place just in case those problems become actual problems moving forward. Now, we do need to replace CJ Uzomah, and that's exactly what I'm going to do with one of my favorite players, Jaheim Bell, the tight end out of Florida State. And again, now you're just bringing a guy. Let's have him compete with Zach Kuntz. If you bring back Kenny Yeboah, let's have him compete with Kenny Yeboah. Let's see who can win tight end 3. That job, and you move on from there. We also need to address the running back room. Oh, this is the Zach Wilson trade. You also need to address the running back room, and I'm going to do that by taking former New York Jets son, Frank Gore Jr. out of Southern Miss, bringing him in and having him be, the third back in a room that I really like in Breece Hall and Israel Abanikanda, but let's just have as much competition in that room as possible. We know how much we like using our running backs. We do want to address the safety position just a little bit, so we're going to get safety Aubrey Burks out of West Virginia. Keeping it going, we're going to take another tackle Zion Nelson out of Miami, and just have offensive linemen. And last but not least, we're going to take center Dylan McMahon out of North Carolina State to come in and back up the backup in Wes Schweitzer, and hopefully look at a guy that we can play on the interior of the defensive line long term. And by the way, I have Zion Nelson as a guy who can probably bump inside, and that's where I kind of look at it. But again, just more depth. Hey, the guy can play tackle? Cool. Probably going to look at him as a guard? Cool. We just need as much offensive line help as possible. And that's how I went about with this draft. And there you can see all of the picks and all of the players and all of the everything that I thought that the New York Jets should do in this draft. Let me know in the comment section below, what do you guys think of this offseason? Do you think that roster is good enough to go and make a push for a Super Bowl? I made a lot of changes. I took a lot of big swings, and I think that they're all worth it. Let me know in the comment section below. Thank you for hanging out through what is a 22-minute video. And last but not least, go Jets.